We just wrapped up day 27 of the Diddy trial, and it seems as if this trial is quickly coming to a close. We have a new timeline, which implies that we are going to be done as soon as next week. My name is Joe Neerman, aka Good Logic. I'm a New York litigator. I've practiced in this very courthouse in the Southern District of New York, and I try and provide a legal perspective as to how the case is proceeding from the perspective of the state and the defense, as well as how an effective job the court is doing while presenting to you the vibe in the courtroom. Today we heard from two different witnesses. The first one was a drug mule named Brendan Paul, who came in there and testified about some of his services that he provided working as a right-hand man for Diddy. And there wasn't really much to take away from that other than, I guess, establishing that what the pink powder was, that it was that Jane had testified about, that it was a form of cocaine. And we also heard from the state's summary witness, who's a special agent, was coming in there to testify with these various charts to try and put information together in a more comprehensive fashion. Now, this is the last of the state's witnesses. He's supposed to be testifying today, and we found out that his testimony, where he's basically going through a different timeline as presented in these charts to try and put together, fit in various pieces as the state comes to a close. They say they're going to expect to be done with the direct testimony on Monday, taking all morning with him, and that his cross should be done that afternoon. At that point, the state is going to rest. The defense says that their witness list is shrinking fast, and they think that they're going to spend perhaps a day or two on defense, and that we should be in closing arguments by next Thursday, which means we could have a verdict 1 week from today. Although I frankly would expect, my expectation is that it's likely going to take the jury a few days over the weekend before they're able to reach any sort of verdict. That would not be obviously this weekend, that would be next weekend after we close. What we've gotten from this final witness so far on direct, and he spent roughly an hour and a half, 2 hours on the stand, was he was talking about he was breaking down various text conversations. Primarily what we've seen so far to establish the fifth and final of the charges, which is the forensic evidence to establish that Diddy should be held liable for violating interstate transportation for the purposes of illegal sexual activity or prostitution, and that it relates to an incident where they flew in Cabral in early 24, and they provide flight information, text exchanges where Diddy is ordering from a service called Cowboys and Angels and having arrangements for him to be flown in, text conversations between Diddy and the owner of Cowboys and Angels, a woman named Bridget, and conversations with Jane to ensure that she's going to be able to go, directing Cabral to the London hotel in Los Angeles, and that he covered the costs of the interstate flight, and that they were staying at the hotel. And the idea is to nail down the fifth and final charge. That charge for illegally transporting for the purposes of illegal sexual activity would have a maximum of 10 years. And that's what he's been testifying about so far. In addition, he's been bringing in various other conversations that I've had here and there. And I'll be frank, I've spoken to a lot of people. It's very boring testimony. It feels very boring. When we're listening to it, it feels as if there's just a glob of information, and they'll just start talking about what happened on or around January 22nd, 2024, and start talking about random text exchanges, not between the parties with each other, but more about like, oh, and here's Diddy talking to his assistant and asking for money, which you can understand if you're really paying attention. You can understand where they're going at, and you need to get this evidence introduced. And I would expect that in closing arguments that we should be getting Wednesday or Thursday of next week, that we're going to have probably Maurene Comey or one of her assistants come out there and present this in an encapsulated, digestible type of way, saying, here's the evidence we threw in front of you, this is what we think it shows, and go through it with charge by charge as to how each of those elements were met. That's how we should anticipate the U.S. attorneys are going to handle this. So it's information that you're sort of getting. They're sort of like throwing a splotch of information on this and a splotch of information there, and then hoping that when they encapsulate it, that together with the charts they presented to try and make it more digestible, which they don't share with us, the viewing audience, the charts. It perhaps is a little bit more compelling if you're actually watching it and seeing the charts there with you. It's been withheld from us. So I can't really weigh in properly as to their effectiveness, because this is an area where the jury is likely going to be seeing things that we in the viewing audience will not see. So it could be more impactful on the jury than it is on those of us who are attending and sitting in the viewing room or in the gallery and are not privy to those same pieces of evidence. But at this point in time, as far as what a typical juror should likely be able to take away at this juncture from what has been presented over the last, with this witness and the other summary witnesses as well, it's hard to imagine that too many of them are sitting there enraptured by what they're hearing. And I think there's a general vibe of people looking for this trial to end. And I want to point out one more thing, which is the longer this trial goes on, I tell you that I report on the vibe, the longer this trial goes on, the more sympathy is being built for Diddy. The overall vibe in this court, I was here from day one, working all the way through now. I missed a couple of days here and there, but by and large, I've been here every day. And I'll tell you right now, the vibe right now, there is a much louder and vociferous chanting of people looking to free Diddy at this point than there was at the outset of this trial, which is obviously not what the state is hoping for. Now, whether or not the jury, that's reflective of how the jury feels, is anybody's guess. In fact, even the jurors, if you think about it, assuming that they're honoring the court's directions and not talking amongst themselves, even the jurors themselves don't really know how the other respective jurors are feeling about this case as it's been progressing along. So they'll only learn that during the course of deliberations, I guess. And we'll only know how they reach, obviously, once they reach their verdict. I'm Joe Neerman, aka Good Logic. If you like this type of content, I urge you please like, share, subscribe. Hit the bell so you get all notifications, because I'm going to be here till we get that verdict. And until then, until next time, I say to you, Godspeed.